Rain pounded the cracked window, each drop a tiny hammer against the glass. The apartment smelled of desperation and discount soup. Elena Vance huddled beneath a threadbare blanket, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through job listings on her ancient laptop. The screen's blue light cast hollow shadows across her cheekbones, accentuating the dark circles that had taken permanent residence beneath her eyes. The radiator in the corner coughed and sputtered, releasing more noise than heat into the cramped studio. Her breath fogged in front of her face. 3 months behind on rent. 2 days until eviction. One last chance. She clicked on the listing again. The salary figure made her heart stutter. More money than she'd seen in years. Too good to be true, especially for a live-in nanny position. The requirements were vague. Resilient individual needed for challenging children. Previous applicants unsuccessful. Housing and meals provided. Immediate start. Inquire at Thorne Manor. Unsuccessful. Not fired or quit. Unsuccessful. Elena's stomach twisted as she glanced at the final notice taped to her refrigerator door. The red stamp across it seemed to pulse in the dim light. Her fingers brushed against the scar on her forearm, a souvenir from foster care number 3. She'd survived worse than challenging children. The laptop screen flickered as thunder cracked outside. For a moment, the listing disappeared, then returned with an update. Interview tomorrow, 8 p.m. She hadn't even applied yet. The cursor blinked, waiting. Elena's finger hovered over the keyboard. The rain intensified, drowning out the sound of her neighbor's television and the distant sirens that were the lullaby of this part of the city. "What choice do I have?" she whispered to the empty room. Her finger pressed down on accept. The iron gates of Thorne Manor rose from the fog like skeletal fingers clawing at the night sky. Elena's taxi retreated down the winding driveway, red taillights swallowed by the mist until she stood alone, suitcase in hand. The gravel beneath her feet crunched with each hesitant step toward the looming Victorian mansion. Gothic spires pierced the clouds. Gargoyles perched along the roofline, their stone eyes tracking her approach. The air felt different here, heavier, colder, as if the property existed in its own atmospheric bubble. The porch steps groaned beneath her weight. Before she could knock, the massive oak door swung inward on silent hinges. A woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun stood in the entryway, her posture rigid as a cemetery statue. "You're 3 minutes early, Miss Vance." Her voice carried the dry rustle of autumn leaves. "Mr. Thorne appreciates punctuality, but not eagerness." Elena swallowed, her throat suddenly parched. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Grady, housekeeper." The woman's gaze flicked over Elena's worn coat and scuffed shoes. "You'll do well to remember that Mr. Thorne values precision in all things." The foyer beyond Mrs. Grady stretched cavernously, marble floors gleaming like black ice beneath crystal chandeliers that cast more shadows than light. The air inside smelled of beeswax and something metallic that Elena couldn't place. "Mr. Thorne will see you in the study." Mrs. Grady turned without waiting for a response, her sensible shoes clicking against the marble in perfect metronomic rhythm. Elena followed, the weight of her suitcase growing with each step. The hallway seemed to elongate before her, portraits lining the walls, faces with aristocratic features and eyes that followed her movement. All shared the same pallor, the same penetrating gaze. "Your predecessors lasted an average of 2 days," Mrs. Grady said without turning. "The record is 4. Mr. Thorne has become impatient." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. What exactly happened to them? Mrs. Grady paused at an ornate door, her hand resting on the brass handle. They were unsuitable. Her lips thinned. The boys require special care. Boys. The listing didn't specify. Twins. Silas and Jasper, 10 years old. Something flickered across Mrs. Grady's face. Was it fear? They keep to themselves, mostly at night. Before Elena could ask another question, Mrs. Grady opened the door and announced, "Miss Vance, sir." The study beyond was a cathedral to darkness. Towering bookshelves lined walls that disappeared into shadows. A massive desk occupied the center of the room, carved from wood so dark it absorbed the meager light from the fireplace. Behind it stood a figure, tall and still, gazing out a window that framed the moon like a portrait. "Miss Vance?" His voice slid through the room like silk over steel. "You've come to care for my sons." He turned, and Elena's breath caught in her throat. Adrian Thorne couldn't have been more than 35, yet authority draped over his shoulders like the tailored suit he wore. His features were carved from marble, high cheekbones, strong jaw, lips that held no warmth. But it was his eyes that froze Elena in place. So dark they appeared black in the firelight, depthless as a midnight ocean. "Yes," she managed, her voice smaller than intended. "I have experience with difficult children." A smile curved his mouth, but never reached his eyes. "Do you?" He moved around the desk with fluid grace. "And what makes you believe your experience is relevant here?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop with his approach. Elena resisted the urge to step back. "I grew up in the system," she said, lifting her chin. "Foster homes, group homes. I've seen every type of troubled child." "Have you?" He stopped before her, close enough that she should have felt his breath. She didn't. "My sons aren't troubled, Miss Vance. They're exceptional." Something in his tone raised goosebumps along her arms. "Exceptional how?" Adrian studied her face with unsettling intensity. "They require a special diet. They sleep during daylight hours. They are sensitive to certain stimuli." "Medical conditions?" Elena asked. "A family inheritance." His smile tightened. "Mrs. Grady will show you to your quarters. You'll meet the boys at midnight." "Midnight?" Elena blinked. "But that's—" "Their waking hour," he finished. "Is that a problem?" The dismissal in his tone was clear. This wasn't a negotiation. Elena thought of her empty apartment, the eviction notice, the dwindling balance in her bank account. "No," she said. "No problem at all." Adrian nodded once. "Your references were unremarkable, your qualifications minimal, but you have something the others lacked." "What's that?" His eyes traveled to the scar on her forearm, visible where her sleeve had risen. "You're a survivor, Miss Vance. We shall see if that's enough." The East Wing corridor stretched before Elena like a throat, waiting to swallow her whole. Mrs. Grady had deposited her at the door with minimal instructions. "Keep to your room until called. Do not wander. The boys are sensitive to new presences." Her quarters were unexpectedly luxurious. A four-poster bed draped in burgundy velvet, antique furniture that belonged in a museum, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub large enough to swim in. But the opulence couldn't mask the oddities. Windows sealed shut with decorative iron grills, heavy curtains that blocked all natural light, and a door that locked from the outside. Elena ran her fingers along the doorframe, feeling the fresh scratch marks on the inside. Someone had tried to claw their way out. The clock on the mantel ticked relentlessly toward midnight. Elena unpacked her meager belongings, each item a reminder of the life she was desperate to escape. The silence of the manor pressed against her eardrums, broken only by occasional creaks that could have been settling wood or footsteps in distant corridors. As she placed her last shirt in the wardrobe, something fluttered to the floor, a folded piece of paper that had been tucked between the drawer and its back panel. Elena's fingers trembled as she unfolded it. The handwriting was frantic, pressed hard enough to tear through the paper in places. They aren't children. Run before midnight. They hunt. The note ended in a violent streak of ink. Elena's pulse roared in her ears. A prank? A warning from a previous nanny trying to secure her position by scaring off competition? The mantel clock began to chime. 1, 2, 3. Elena counted each resonant toll, her body growing colder with each sound. 10, 11, 12, midnight. The lock on her door clicked open. For several heartbeats, Elena remained frozen, staring at the brass doorknob as it slowly turned. The hinges whispered as the door swung inward, revealing the empty corridor beyond. Empty except for two small silhouettes standing hand in hand in the shadows. "You're not running." The voice was childlike, but unnaturally hollow. "They always run." The twins stepped forward in perfect synchronization. Identical in every way, pale skin that seemed to glow in the darkness, black hair that fell in waves to their shoulders, and eyes that reflected the candlelight, like a predator's in the night. "I'm Elena," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "You must be Silas and Jasper." They tilted their heads in the same direction, studying her with unblinking eyes. "How do you know which is which?" asked the one on the right. "A test." Elena swallowed. "I don't. Not yet. But I'd like to learn." The twins exchanged a glance, communicating silently in that way only twins can. Then they smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too numerous. "We're hungry," they said in unison. "Father said you'd feed us." Elena's heart stuttered. The note in her hand suddenly felt heavier. "They hunt." "What do you usually eat at this hour?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice casual. The twin on the left, Silas or Jasper, she couldn't tell, stepped closer, nostrils flaring slightly. Something warm. His brother joined him, both advancing with the fluid grace of their father. Something fresh. Something alive. They finished together. Elena backed up until her legs hit the edge of the bed. The twins followed, their movements synchronized, predatory. The air in the room grew colder, stirring the curtains despite the sealed windows. "Mrs. Grady usually prepares your meals," Elena said, reaching blindly behind her for anything that might serve as a weapon. "Mrs. Grady isn't here," said the twin on the right. "Just you." They lunged forward with impossible speed. Elena's hand closed around the heavy silver candlestick on the nightstand. She swung it in a wide arc, the flame leaving a trail of light between her and the advancing twins. They hissed in unison, recoiling from the fire with inhuman reflexes. "No," Elena said firmly, holding the flame before her like a shield. "Whatever game this is, it stops now. I'm not running, and I'm not afraid of you." The first lie she'd told in the house. The twins stared at her with identical expressions of surprise, then curiosity. They circled her like wolves, keeping just beyond the candlelight's reach. "She's different," one whispered. "She's lying," said the other. "Her heart is racing. I can hear it." "Hear it? From across the room?" The twins stopped circling. They stood at the foot of her bed, their small faces suddenly serious. "If you won't run," said the one on the left, "and you won't feed us." "Then what good are you?" finished his brother. The candle in Elena's hand flickered, then extinguished as if snuffed by an invisible hand. Darkness swallowed the room. Elena felt rather than saw them move. A displacement of air, a whisper of fabric, the sensation of being surrounded. Cold fingers brushed against her neck, her wrist, her cheek, testing, tasting. "Your blood smells like fear," came a whisper at her ear, "but also like fight." "Father was right," said another voice from the darkness. "This one might survive." Something sharp pricked Elena's wrist, not quite breaking the skin, but threatening to. A warning. The lights suddenly blazed to life. Adrian Thorne stood in the doorway, his presence filling the room like a physical force. The twins were on either side of Elena, one holding her wrist to his nose, the other with his face inches from her throat. "Enough," Adrian said softly. The twins released her immediately, moving to stand before their father with heads bowed. "She didn't run," said one, a note of respect in his voice. "And she fought back," added the other. Adrian's gaze moved from his sons to Elena, who stood trembling but upright, the extinguished candlestick still clutched in her white-knuckled grip. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or approval. "It seems, Miss Vance, that you've passed the first test." His voice was cool, measured. "Few make it this far." Elena found her voice. "Test? What kind of sick game are you playing?" "Not a game." Adrian stepped into the room, and Elena noticed for the first time how he seemed to absorb the light around him. "A necessity. My sons require special care from someone who won't flee at the first sign of their nature." As if on cue, one of the twins turned to look at Elena, and in the bright light, she saw what the darkness had hidden. Eyes that had shifted from dark brown to a luminous crimson, pupils contracted to vertical slits like a cat's. Not human, not children. The note hadn't been a prank. "What are they?" Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. Adrian's smile revealed teeth as sharp as his son's, canines elongated into delicate points. "The better question, Miss Vance," he said softly, "is what are we?" The room seemed to shrink around Elena, the walls closing in as the full horror of her situation crystallized. Vampires. She was trapped in a house with vampires. "We are what humans call vampires, Miss Vance," Adrian said, his voice like velvet over steel, "though I find the term rather quaint." Her pulse hammered in her ears. The candlestick slipped from her fingers, clattering against the hardwood floor. The twins flinched at the sound, their supernatural reflexes evident in the way they moved. Too quick, too fluid. "If you're going to kill me," Elena said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice, "just get it over with." A look of genuine surprise crossed Adrian's face. "Kill you? If that were our intention, you wouldn't have made it past the front gate." He gestured to the twins. "Silas, Jasper, you've frightened Miss Vance enough for one evening. Apologize." The boys exchanged glances, their crimson eyes gradually fading back to brown. The taller one, Silas, she thought, stepped forward first. "We weren't going to hurt you," he said, his voice suddenly childlike again. "Not really." "We just wanted to see if you were brave," Jasper added, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "The last one wasn't." She screamed and screamed. Elena's stomach lurched. "What happened to her?" "Nothing by our hand," Adrian interjected smoothly. "She fled into the night. Unfortunately, there are others of our kind who are less disciplined." The implication hung in the air like a death knell. "So I'm trapped here," Elena whispered. "Not trapped," Adrian corrected. "Protected." There's a difference, Miss Vance. He moved toward the window, his reflection absent in the glass. Outside, the moon hung low and bloated, casting silver light across the grounds. The world has changed for you tonight. I understand that's disorienting. Disorienting. The understatement made hysterical laughter bubble in Elena's throat, but she swallowed it down. Why me? Why bring a human here at all? Adrian turned, his gaze penetrating. Because my sons need more than I can give them. They need someone who can walk in daylight, someone who remembers what it means to be human. His voice softened almost imperceptibly. They need a mother. The word struck Elena like a physical blow. I'm not their biological mother, obviously, Adrian said, but they need guidance that I cannot provide, especially now. Now? A shadow passed over his face. The Crimson Council has restrictions on how we interact with humans. Bringing you here was a risk, but a calculated one. Jasper had edged closer to Elena while they spoke. His small hand reached out, hovering near hers without touching. Will you stay? He asked, his voice small. Please? Elena looked at the child. No, the vampire standing before her. Behind the predatory nature she'd glimpsed earlier, she saw something achingly familiar. Loneliness. The same emptiness that had driven her to answer that strange advertisement in the first place. I don't have much choice, do I? She said. Adrian's lips curved into something not quite a smile. There are always choices, Miss Vance, but few of them are without consequences. The next morning arrived with cruel brightness, sunlight streaming through windows that had been shuttered the night before. Elena woke disoriented, half convinced she'd dreamed the entire encounter, until she noticed Mrs. Grady arranging a breakfast tray by her bedside. Good morning, dear, the housekeeper said, her weathered face betraying nothing of the house's secrets. Master Thorne asked me to see that you're comfortable. Elena sat up, clutching the blankets to her chest. Do you know what they are? Mrs. Grady's hands stilled on the teapot. I've served the Thorne family for 30 years, child. I know exactly what they are. And you stay. Willingly? The older woman's eyes crinkled with something like amusement. Not everyone fears the night, Miss Vance. Some of us have found that monsters make for better masters than men. She poured tea into a delicate china cup. The boys will be waiting for you in the library. They're excited to have you here. After Mrs. Grady left, Elena dressed slowly, her mind racing. The rational part of her screamed to run, to flee while the sun was up. But something else, curiosity perhaps, or the memory of Jasper's plaintive question, kept her rooted. The library was a vast, two-story room lined with books that looked ancient enough to crumble at a touch. The twins sat at a large oak table, heads bent over what appeared to be schoolwork. They looked up in perfect unison as she entered, their movements synchronized in a way that sent a chill down her spine. You stayed, Silas said, surprise evident in his voice. I did, Elena replied, approaching cautiously. Jasper beamed, revealing perfectly normal teeth, no fangs in sight. Father said you might not. He said humans are unpredictable when they're scared. Are you scared of us? Silas asked, his dark eyes searching her face. Elena considered lying, then thought better of it. Yes, she admitted. But I'm also curious. This seemed to please them. They exchanged a glance that contained an entire conversation, then Silas pushed a book toward her. We're supposed to be studying human history, he said, but it's boring when you've lived through most of it. Elena blinked. How old are you? Physically or actually? Jasper asked. Both, I suppose. We were turned when we were 10, Silas explained. That was in 1897. But we're much better behaved than we look, Jasper added earnestly. Father makes sure of it. Over a century old, trapped in children's bodies. The thought made Elena's heart ache unexpectedly. And your father? How long has he been? Vampire, Jasper supplied helpfully. You can say it. It's not a bad word. Father is very old, Silas said, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. He doesn't like to talk about before. Before? Before us, Jasper clarified. He found us in London during the cholera epidemic. We were dying. Silas nodded solemnly. He saved us, made us like him. The casual way they discussed their transformation sent gooseflesh racing up Elena's arms. And your mother? She asked gently. Their faces clouded simultaneously. She died before, Silas said. That's why Father thought we needed someone like you, Jasper finished. The library door opened and Adrian entered, his tall frame silhouetted against the hallway light. Unlike his sons, he moved with a deliberate slowness, as if constantly reminding himself to appear human. I see you've met your pupils properly, Miss Vance, he said. I trust they're behaving themselves? We are, the twins chorused. Adrian's gaze fell on Elena, assessing. And you've decided to stay. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. For now. Something flickered in his eyes, relief perhaps. Then we should discuss your duties and the rules. The rules, as it turned out, were simple but non-negotiable. Elena was never to leave the estate grounds alone. She was to keep the twins indoors during peak daylight hours. Not because sunlight would kill them, Adrian explained, but because it weakened them significantly. And most importantly, she was never to invite anyone onto the property without his explicit permission. The world believes my sons and I suffer from a rare photosensitivity disorder, Adrian explained as they walked the perimeter of the vast gardens. It's a convenient fiction that explains our reclusive lifestyle. Elena watched him carefully, noting how he stayed in the shadow of the hedgerows. Even in daylight, there was something mesmerizing about his presence, a gravitational pull she found herself resisting. And what happens if I break these rules? She asked. Adrian stopped, turning to face her fully. In the filtered sunlight, his skin had an almost translucent quality, the veins beneath visible like a marble statue's. I don't threaten, Miss Vance, he said quietly. But understand this, my son's safety is paramount. Anyone who endangers that will find me unforgiving. The warning was delivered without heat, which somehow made it more terrifying. I understand, she said. His expression softened marginally. Good. Then perhaps we can establish a mutual trust. As they continued walking, Elena gathered her courage. The twins mentioned they were turned during a cholera epidemic, that you saved them. Adrian's jaw tightened. They were orphaned, dying in a makeshift hospital with dozens of others. No one noticed when I took them. That was compassionate, Elena ventured. A bitter smile touched his lips. Was it? I've often wondered. I spared them death, but condemned them to an eternal childhood. Sometimes I think true compassion would have been letting them go. The raw honesty in his voice caught her off guard. Do they feel that way? No, Adrian admitted. They're grateful, which makes my responsibility to them all the heavier. He glanced at her. That's why you're here, Miss Vance. They need someone who remembers what it means to grow, to change. I've been static for too long. Before she could respond, a shrill cry split the air. They both turned to see Jasper sprinting across the lawn toward them, his face contorted in pain. "Father!" he wailed, clutching his hand to his chest. Adrian moved with inhuman speed, kneeling before his son in an instant. "What happened?" he demanded, gently taking Jasper's hand. Elena gasped when she saw the angry red burn spreading across the boy's palm. "I wanted to pick a flower for Miss Elena," Jasper sobbed. "But I forgot about the silver garden fence." Adrian's face darkened as he examined the wound. "Silver burns us," he explained to Elena without looking up. "A vulnerability I should have warned you about." He bit into his own wrist, drawing blood, and pressed it to Jasper's burn. Elena watched in fascinated horror as the wound began to close, new skin forming before her eyes. "Better?" Adrian asked softly. Jasper nodded, sniffling. "I'm sorry, Father. It's all right. But this is why we have rules." Adrian wiped the remaining blood away with a handkerchief, then finally looked up at Elena, who stood frozen. "Are you all right, Miss Vance? You look pale." "I'm fine," she managed, though her heart was racing. I've never seen our healing capabilities." Adrian finished for her. "Another aspect of our nature. Convenient, but not without limits." Jasper looked up at Elena with tear-streaked cheeks. "Are you afraid again?" The vulnerability in his question pierced through her shock. Despite what she'd just witnessed, the blood, the supernatural healing, she found herself moving forward, kneeling beside them. "No," she said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I'm not afraid. I'm glad you're not hurt anymore." Jasper's face brightened, and he threw his arms around her neck in a sudden hug. Elena stiffened, acutely aware of Adrian watching them, then slowly returned the embrace. Over Jasper's shoulder, her eyes met Adrian's. Something unreadable passed across his face, a complex emotion that vanished before she could decipher it. "Perhaps," he said quietly. "This arrangement might work after all." The days that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. Elena taught the twins during daylight hours, not just the standard curriculum, but art, music, and literature that they'd missed in their isolated existence. They absorbed knowledge with supernatural quickness, but their emotional responses remained childlike, a dissonance that Elena found both endearing and unsettling. At night, when they were at their strongest, Adrian would take over, teaching them skills Elena couldn't begin to comprehend. She caught glimpses sometimes, the three of them moving through the gardens with preternatural grace, or huddled in the library over ancient texts written in languages long dead. On the seventh night, Elena woke to the sound of breaking glass. She sat bolt upright, heart hammering, as the twins burst into her room, their eyes wild with excitement. "Elena, come quick!" Silas urged, bouncing on his toes. "Father's caught an intruder!" She scrambled out of bed, pulling a robe around her nightgown. "What? Who?" "Another vampire," Jasper whispered, his eyes wide. "A rogue one. Father says it's dangerous." They led her down to the grand foyer, where Adrian stood over a kneeling figure, a young man with matted hair and wild eyes. Blood stained the marble floor beneath him. "Miss Vance," Adrian acknowledged her without looking up. "I apologize for the disturbance. This situation will be resolved shortly." The captive vampire snarled, revealing fangs longer and less refined than Adrian's. "The council will hear of this, Thorne," he spat. "Harboring a human, they'll take your precious sons for this violation." Adrian's hand tightened around the intruder's throat. "The council has no jurisdiction over my family." "Every vampire answers to the Crimson Council," the rogue gasped. Even the great Adrian Thorne. Elena felt the twins press against her sides, their earlier excitement replaced by fear. "What's the Crimson Council?" she whispered. "The oldest vampires," Silas murmured. "They make the laws. And we're breaking them by having you here," Jasper added. Adrian's gaze finally flicked to Elena, his expression grim. "Take the boys back upstairs, Miss Vance. This isn't something they should witness." The rogue vampire laughed, a ragged sound. Still protecting their innocence, after all this time? His wild eyes found Elena. "Did he tell you what they did to their last nanny? What they'll eventually do to you?" Adrian moved with blinding speed, slamming the intruder against the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. "Enough!" Elena backed away, pulling the twins with her. "Come on, boys. Your father's right. This isn't for you to see." "But Elena," Silas began to protest. "Now," she said firmly, guiding them toward the stairs. As they retreated, she heard the rogue call after them. "Ask him about the blood bond. Ask what happens when they get hungry enough." She hurried the twins to their bedroom, trying to ignore the sounds of struggle echoing through the mansion. Once they were settled, their faces still tight with worry, she sat on the edge of Jasper's bed. "What did he mean?" she asked gently. "About the blood bond?" The twins exchanged nervous glances. "We're not supposed to talk about it," Silas said, fidgeting with his blanket. "Father says it's private," Jasper added. Elena took a deep breath. "I think I need to know, especially if it concerns me." After a long silence, Silas spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes, when vampires are very young, they form attachments to humans, special humans. Like mothers," Jasper interjected, or someone who feels like one. "And if the bond gets strong enough," Silas continued, we might want to taste their blood," Jasper finished, looking miserable. "Not to hurt them, just to be closer." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "Is that what happened to the last nanny?" They both shook their heads vigorously. "We never bonded with her," Silas said. "She was mean. She called us monsters when Father wasn't listening." "But you're different," Jasper said, his eyes wide and earnest. "You're not afraid of us. Not really." "You hug us," Silas added. "No one except Father has hugged us in a very long time." The naked longing in their voices made Elena's heart constrict. Despite everything, their nature, the danger, the bizarre situation she'd found herself in, she felt a surge of protectiveness toward these eternal children. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised, squeezing their hands. "Now try to sleep. Everything will be all right." It was a lie, of course. Nothing about this situation was all right. But as she watched the twins finally drift off, their faces peaceful in sleep, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. When she slipped out of their room, she found Adrian waiting in the hallway, his clothes immaculate despite the violence she'd witnessed earlier. No trace of the intruder remained. "They're asleep," she said, closing their door softly. Adrian nodded. "Thank you for removing them from the situation. That was considerate. What happened to him? The rogue?" "He's been dealt with," Adrian said, his tone making it clear he wouldn't elaborate. "But his presence here is concerning. The Crimson Council doesn't usually send scouts this far from their territory." "The boys told me about the blood bond," Elena said, watching his face carefully, "and about the Council's laws against humans knowing about vampires." Adrian's expression hardened. "They shouldn't have spoken of such things." "They were frightened," Elena countered. "They needed reassurance." "And did you give it to them?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. I told them I wasn't going anywhere. Something flickered in Adrian's eyes. Surprise, perhaps? Or relief? Even knowing the risk? I made a commitment to them, Elena said. I don't break my promises. Adrian studied her for a long moment. You continue to surprise me, Miss Vance. Most humans would have fled by now. I'm not most humans. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Clearly. He gestured toward the stairs. Walk with me. There are things you should know if you're truly committed to staying. They descended to the library, where a fire had been lit despite the summer warmth. Adrian moved to a cabinet and withdrew a crystal decanter, pouring a dark liquid into 2 glasses. Don't worry, he said, noting her hesitation. It's brandy, not blood. Elena accepted the glass, taking a small sip. The liquor burned pleasantly down her throat. What did the intruder mean about the council taking your sons? Adrian's jaw tightened. The Crimson Council believes that vampire children are too unpredictable, too difficult to control. They prefer that only adults be turned. He stared into the fire. When I transformed Silas and Jasper, I broke one of their oldest laws. But that was over a century ago. Surely they've forgotten by now. Vampires have long memories, Miss Vance, and longer grudges. He took a drink. The council granted me a conditional pardon, so long as the boys remained perfectly controlled, perfectly hidden from human society. Understanding dawned. And by bringing me here, you've violated those terms. Yes. Why risk it? Adrian set his glass down, turning to face her fully. In the firelight, his features seemed carved from marble, beautiful and cold. Because my sons are suffering. They've been isolated for too long, denied the emotional connections that even vampires require. I've done my best, but they need a mother, Elena finished softly. They need someone human, Adrian corrected. Someone who can teach them compassion, empathy, qualities that fade with immortality. And what happens if the council discovers I'm here? Adrian's expression darkened. They would see it as a betrayal, a threat to our secrecy. He hesitated. They would eliminate the threat. You mean kill me? Yes, and possibly punish my sons as well. His voice dropped lower. Which is why no one can know you're here. No one. The weight of his words settled over her like a shroud. She was completely cut off from her former life, bound to this house and its immortal inhabitants by a promise she'd made before understanding the consequences. I should be terrified, she murmured, more to herself than to him. But you're not, Adrian observed, studying her with those penetrating eyes. No, Elena admitted. I'm not anymore. She met his gaze steadily. The boys need me. That's enough. Something shifted in Adrian's expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight parting of lips. For a brief moment, he looked almost human. You are remarkable, Elena Vance, he said, using her first name for the first time. The intimacy of it sent an unexpected warmth through her veins. I'm just doing what anyone would do. No, Adrian said quietly. You're not. The incident with the rogue vampire changed something in the household. The twins became more protective of Elena, rarely letting her out of their sight during daylight hours. Adrian, too, seemed more present, joining them for evening meals he didn't eat, watching their interactions with an intensity that made Elena's skin prickle with awareness. 2 weeks after her arrival, she woke in the middle of the night to find Jasper standing beside her bed, his small face twisted with anguish. Jasper? She mumbled, sitting up. What's wrong? I had a nightmare. he whispered. About before. About being sick. Elena's heart clenched. She lifted her blanket, making space beside her. Come here. Jasper climbed in, his body unnaturally cool against hers. I was dying again, he said, his voice small, and Father wasn't there to save me. It was just a dream, Elena soothed, stroking his hair. You're safe now. But I'm so hungry, he whimpered. Elena froze, suddenly very aware of the pulse in her throat, of the child who was not a child pressed against her side. Hungry? She echoed cautiously. Jasper nodded miserably. Father gives us blood from the butcher, but it's not the same. It doesn't make the hunger go away. Not really. Have you told him? He knows, but he says we have to control it. Jasper looked up at her, his eyes shifting from brown to that unsettling crimson. I can hear your heartbeat, Elena. It's so loud. Fear prickled along her spine, but she remained still. Jasper, you need to go get your father. I don't want to hurt you, he said, tears welling in his eyes. I never want to hurt you. I know, she whispered, fighting to keep her voice steady. I know you don't. His small hand reached up, touching her cheek with a gentleness that belied his nature. You're not like the others. You're not afraid of what we are. Sometimes I am, Elena admitted, but that doesn't mean I don't care about you. Something in her words seemed to reach him. The crimson in his eyes receded slightly. Really? Really, she affirmed. Now please go get your father. Jasper hesitated, then nodded. He slipped from the bed and was gone in a blur of movement that still startled her, even now. Elena sat up, wrapping her arms around herself. The hunger in Jasper's eyes had been unmistakable, primal, instinctive. For the first time since arriving, she felt the true weight of the danger she was in. She had barely gathered herself when the door opened again. Adrian stood in the threshold, Jasper half hidden behind him. Miss Vance, Adrian said, his voice carefully controlled. Are you all right? I'm fine, she assured him, though her racing heart betrayed her. Jasper had a nightmare. Adrian's gaze was penetrating, assessing. Jasper, wait for me in your room. I need to speak with Miss Vance alone. The boy nodded, casting one apologetic glance at Elena before disappearing. Adrian entered the room, closing the door behind him. He was hungry, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Did he try to feed from you? No, Elena said firmly. He was fighting it. He didn't want to hurt me. Relief flickered across Adrian's face. The blood bond is forming faster than I anticipated. It's my fault. I should have increased their rations. He said the butcher's blood doesn't satisfy them. It doesn't, Adrian acknowledged. Animal blood sustains us, but it's bland, like surviving on bread and water. He moved closer, his tall frame imposing in the confined space of her bedroom. Human blood is different, especially from someone they've bonded with. Elena swallowed hard. What exactly does this bond mean? Adrian's eyes searched hers. It means they've accepted you as family, as someone they love and trust. He hesitated. It also means they crave your blood specifically, not just any humans. And if they took it? A small amount would strengthen the bond. Too much would be dangerous, for you and for them. Young vampires struggle with control. Elena took a deep breath. What if I offered it? Willingly. Adrian went utterly still. What are you suggesting? They're suffering, Elena said. I can see it. If a small amount would help them. No. Adrian's voice was sharp. final. I won't allow it. They're your sons, but it's my blood, Elena countered, surprising herself with her boldness. My choice. Adrian moved with supernatural speed, suddenly standing directly before her. You don't understand what you're offering, he said, his voice low and intense. The bond goes both ways, Elena. Once formed, it cannot be broken, not without devastating consequences. For them, or for me. For all of you. His eyes held hers, and she saw something there she hadn't expected, fear. They've already lost one mother. I won't let them lose another. The word hung between them, charged with meaning. Mother. Is that what she had become to them? Is that what she wanted to be? I'm not going anywhere, she said, echoing her promise to the twins. Adrian's expression softened. Your loyalty is admirable, but this isn't a decision to make lightly or in the middle of the night. He stepped back. Rest. We'll discuss this further tomorrow. As he turned to leave, Elena called after him. Would it really be so terrible? The bond? Adrian paused at the door, his back to her. No, he said softly. That's what makes it so dangerous. The following evening, Elena found herself in Adrian's study, a room she'd never been invited into before. Dark wood paneling gave it a somber atmosphere, the walls lined with books far older than any in the main library. Adrian stood by the window, watching the sunset with the wistful expression of someone remembering a distant love. The twins sat on a leather sofa, unnaturally still, their faces solemn. I've explained to Silas and Jasper what you proposed, Adrian said without turning. And the implications. Elena glanced at the boys, who watched her with a mixture of hope and apprehension. And if you still wish to proceed, I won't stop you. Adrian finally faced her. But you must understand exactly what you're agreeing to. He gestured for her to sit in an armchair opposite the twins. The blood bond is ancient magic, older than written history. Once established, it creates a connection that transcends physical distance. You would feel their emotions. They would sense your well-being. Like telepathy? Elena asked. More like awareness, Adrian clarified. You wouldn't read each other's thoughts, but you would know if they were in danger, in pain, and they would know the same of you. It would make us a real family, Jasper said, his voice small but hopeful. A real family, Silas echoed. Adrian continued. The bond would also create an obligation. They would be driven to protect you. You would feel compelled to nurture them. These aren't mere feelings, Elena. They're imperatives, as powerful as hunger or thirst. And if I wanted to leave someday? Elena asked, needing to understand the full consequences. A shadow crossed Adrian's face. The separation would cause pain, physical pain, for all of you. The further the distance, the greater the suffering. So I would be bound to them, forever. Yes, Adrian said simply. This is why I resisted. It's not a commitment anyone should make lightly, especially not a mortal. Elena looked at the twins, these ancient children with their hopeful eyes and lonely hearts. Then at Adrian, whose face betrayed nothing but whose eyes held a universe of concern. I understand, she said finally, and I still want to do it. Relief and joy transformed the twins' faces. They moved to her side in an instant, each taking one of her hands. Really? Silas asked, his voice trembling. Really, Elena confirmed, squeezing their cool fingers. Adrian watched them, his expression unreadable. Very well, but we will proceed with caution. A few drops only from each of them. He fixed the twins with a stern look. You will stop the moment I tell you to. Is that understood? They nodded solemnly. Elena, Adrian said, his voice gentler now. Are you certain? She met his gaze steadily. I am. Adrian nodded once, then moved to a cabinet, withdrawing a small silver knife. He returned to kneel before Elena, his movements deliberate, controlled. Your wrist, he instructed. It will hurt less than your neck. Elena extended her arm, palm up. The twins watched with rapt attention as Adrian made a small, precise cut across her wrist. Blood welled immediately, bright red against her pale skin. Remember, Adrian said to his sons, a few drops only, and when I say stop, you stop. Silas went first, his cool fingers cradling her wrist with surprising tenderness. He lowered his mouth to the cut, his lips sealing over the wound. Elena gasped at the strange sensation, not painful, but intense, intimate in a way she hadn't expected. After a few seconds, Adrian touched Silas's shoulder. Enough. The boy obeyed instantly, lifting his head. His eyes had shifted to that brilliant crimson, but his expression was one of wonder, not hunger. I can feel you, he whispered, awe in his voice. Inside. Jasper took his turn next, his approach even gentler than his brother's. When his lips met her skin, Elena felt a curious warmth spreading up her arm, into her chest, a connection forming, tendrils of awareness extending between them. Enough, Adrian said again, and Jasper withdrew. The twins stared at Elena with identical expressions of joy and disbelief. She felt it too, a new awareness of them, a sense of their emotions hovering at the edge of her consciousness. It worked, Jasper breathed. Father, it worked. Adrian pressed a clean handkerchief to Elena's wrist. How do you feel? He asked her quietly. Different, she said, trying to articulate the strange new sensations. Connected. I can feel them like new chambers in my heart. Adrian's fingers lingered on her wrist, his touch cool but not unpleasant. The bond will strengthen over time. You'll need to learn to manage it, to create boundaries. Will you help me? Elena asked, suddenly aware of how little she knew about this supernatural world she'd entered. Something shifted in Adrian's expression, a softening, a vulnerability she'd never seen before. Yes, he promised. I will help you. As the twins embraced her, their joy radiating through the newly formed bond, Elena caught Adrian watching them. For the briefest moment, his careful mask slipped, revealing a longing so profound it took her breath away. Not just for his son's happiness, she realized with sudden clarity, but for connection, for family, for her. The revelation should have frightened her. Instead, she found herself wondering what it would be like to form a bond with him as well, to feel the emotions he kept so carefully guarded, to know the man behind the monster. The thought had barely formed when a tremendous crash shattered the moment. The study door burst inward, splintering from its hinges. 3 figures stood in the doorway, pale, beautiful, and terrible in their stillness. Adrian moved with blinding speed, positioning himself between the intruders and his family. "How dare you enter my home uninvited?" he snarled, his voice transformed into something inhuman. The central figure, a woman with white blonde hair and eyes like Arctic ice, smiled coldly. "The Crimson Council requires no invitation, Adrian Thorne. Not when the laws have been broken." Her gaze shifted to Elena, who clutched the twins protectively against her. "So it's true," the woman said. "You've not only harbored a human, but bound her to your abominations." She made a small gesture, and the two vampires flanking her stepped forward. "By the authority of the council, I hereby claim custody of Silas and Jasper Thorne, and sentence the human to death for knowledge of our kind." Elena's heart lurched as the council members' words hung in the air. The twins pressed against her, trembling. She felt their terror through the bond, raw and primal. Jasper's claws extended unconsciously, digging into her arm, but she barely registered the pain. Adrian's form seemed to expand, darkness gathering around him like a storm cloud. "You will not touch them," he said, his voice a low thunder that vibrated through the floorboards. The blonde vampire's smile only widened. "Thorne, your arrogance is legendary. Did you truly believe we wouldn't discover your little experiment?" Her gaze flicked to Elena. "Binding a human to your offspring. Disgusting. The ancient laws are clear." "Counselor Elise," Adrian said, his tone shifting to something dangerously calm. "You overstep. My sons have broken no laws." "But you have," said one of the male vampires flanking Elise. "Revealing our existence to humans without council approval, harboring a witness, creating unauthorized blood bonds." Elena felt the twins' grip tighten. Through their connection, she sensed their memories, flashes of other homes, other nannies, other council visits that ended in screams and blood. They had seen this before. They knew what came next. Not this time. Before she could second-guess herself, Elena stepped forward, placing herself slightly ahead of Adrian. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as all vampire eyes locked onto her. "I'm not just a witness," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "And I wasn't revealed anything. I figured it out myself." Elise's perfect eyebrows arched. "The human speaks. How quaint." "Elena," Adrian warned, his hand gripping her shoulder. She could feel his tension, his fear, not for himself, but for her. She shook her head slightly. "Let me speak." Then to the council. "You talk about laws. Do those laws include a right to defense? Or do you just execute first and ask questions never?" A ripple of surprise passed through the council members. The taller male vampire narrowed his eyes. "Humans have no standing in our courts." "Then your laws are flawed," Elena shot back. "Because I'm standing right here, bonded to these children who have done nothing wrong except exist. And if you want them, you'll have to go through me first." Elise's laughter was like breaking glass. "That can be arranged, pet." "No." Adrian's voice cut through the room like a blade. "If you insist on this farce, Elise, then I invoke the right of familial defense. The ancient laws permit it, even for a human bonded to my bloodline." Elise's smile faltered. The other council members exchanged glances. "You would risk everything for this arrangement?" Elise asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. "For my family," Adrian corrected, moving to stand beside Elena. "Yes." The word family hung in the air between them. Elena felt something shift in the bond with the twins, a flare of hope, of belonging. "Very well," Elise said finally. "The right of familial defense is acknowledged. You have until dawn to prepare your case. The full council will convene here." Her cold eyes swept over Elena. "Though I doubt it will change the outcome." With a gesture, she turned, her companions following. At the shattered doorway, she paused. "Oh, and Adrian, don't bother trying to run. We've surrounded the estate." When they were gone, Elena's knees nearly buckled. Adrian caught her arm, steadying her. "That," he said quietly, was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever witnessed. Probably both, she admitted, her voice shaking now that the adrenaline was ebbing. What's the right of familial defense? An ancient provision, rarely invoked. His eyes were troubled. It gives us time, nothing more. Time for what? Silas asked, his small voice breaking the tension. Adrian looked down at his sons, then at Elena. Something in his expression softened. Time to fight back. The hours before dawn passed in a blur of preparation. Mrs. Grady appeared from the servants' quarters, her usual stoicism replaced by grim efficiency as she helped barricade the vulnerable points of the house. Elena learned she had been with the Thornes for decades, another human who had discovered the truth and chosen to stay. The council's been trying to get those boys for years, Mrs. Grady muttered as she handed Elena a mug of strong tea laced with something stronger. They fear what they don't understand. In Adrian's study, now doorless and exposed, he paced like a caged predator while making phone calls. Elena caught fragments, names she didn't recognize, favors being called in, threats barely veiled. The twins refused to leave her side. Through their bond, she felt their fear, but also their determination. They had never had someone stand up for them before. Not like this. "What happens at dawn?" she asked Adrian when he finally ended his calls. He looked exhausted, the immortal mask slipping to reveal the weight of centuries. "The council will convene. 13 members in total. They'll hear our defense, then vote. And if we lose?" His silence was answer enough. Elena swallowed hard. "Then we need to make sure we win." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Just like that?" "Just like that," she affirmed, though her heart hammered. "Tell me everything about them. Their weaknesses, their politics, their grudges." For the next hour, Adrian outlined the council's complex web of alliances and resentments. Elise, it seemed, had personal reasons to despise him, a centuries-old rejection that had festered into hatred. Others on the council feared the twins' unique abilities, seeing them as potential weapons or threats to the established order. "And what about you?" Elena asked. "Where do you stand in their hierarchy?" Adrian's expression darkened. "I've spent centuries avoiding their politics. My bloodline is problematic for them. Too old, too powerful to eliminate easily, but too independent to control." "Your creator," Elena realized. "The one in the portrait. They fear that connection." He nodded slowly. "They fear what they cannot understand, and they have never understood how I could produce offspring when others cannot." A soft knock interrupted them. Jordan Banks stood in the doorway, his youthful face unusually grave. "They've got at least 20 enforcers surrounding the property," he reported. "Heavy weaponry, UV grenades, silver nets, the works." Adrian nodded as if this was expected. "And the others?" "6 have agreed to come. It's not much, but they'll stand witness." Elena looked between them. "Witness to what?" Adrian's eyes met hers, ancient and tired. "To whatever happens next." As the first hint of pre-dawn light touched the horizon, vehicles began arriving. Sleek black cars with tinted windows disgorged pale, elegant figures who moved with the unnatural grace of predators. The council was assembling. In the twins' room, Elena helped them dress in their finest clothes, small suits that made them look both vulnerable and dignified. Jasper's eyes were wide with fear, but Silas had a determined set to his jaw that reminded her painfully of Adrian. "Are they going to kill us?" Jasper whispered. Elena knelt before him, taking his small hands in hers. "No," she said firmly. "I won't let them." "But you're just human," Silas said, though there was no cruelty in his observation. Elena smiled, brushing his wild hair from his forehead. Sometimes that's enough. When they descended the grand staircase, the entrance hall had been transformed. The council members stood in a semicircle, their pale faces like marble sculptures in the dim light. Behind them, their enforcers lined the walls, silent, watchful. Elise stood at the center, resplendent in crimson. Her smile was a predator's. "The Thorne family," she announced, the word family dripping with disdain. "And their pet. How domestic." Adrian stepped forward, his posture regal despite the circumstances. "The right of familial defense has been invoked. We stand ready to present our case." An older vampire with silver-streaked hair nodded. "The council recognizes the right. Proceed." Adrian began to speak, his voice measured and diplomatic, as he outlined the legal arguments for their unusual arrangement. Elena watched the council members' faces, noting who seemed sympathetic, who hostile, who merely bored. But as Adrian continued, she sensed something was wrong. The council's expressions weren't changing. If anything, they seemed increasingly impatient. This wasn't working. Through her bond with the twins, she felt their growing despair. They could sense it too, the inevitable verdict forming in the council's collective mind. "Enough," Elise finally interrupted. "These technical arguments are tedious, Thorne. The fact remains, you've bound a human to your offspring without permission. The penalty is clear." "The bond was my choice," Elena said suddenly. All eyes turned to her. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. "Humans don't get choices in this matter," said a gaunt council member. "Then maybe you should reconsider your laws," Elena replied, stepping forward. "Because I chose this family. I chose these children." "Children?" Elise scoffed. "They are abominations, failed experiments." Elena felt the twins flinch through their bond. Something hot and protective surged through her. "They are children," she insisted, her voice rising. "Intelligent, compassionate, curious children who deserve protection and love like any others. And if you can't see that, then you're the monsters in this room, not them." A murmur ran through the council. Adrian shot her a warning look, but she couldn't stop now. "You talk about laws and rules, but this isn't about that. This is about fear. You're afraid of them because they're different. You're afraid of me because I know the truth and wasn't broken by it." She looked directly at Elise. "And you're afraid of Adrian because he created something you couldn't control." Elise's beautiful face contorted with rage. Silence. Her. Two enforcers moved forward, but Adrian was faster, placing himself between them and Elena. "The human speaks truth," came a new voice. The crowd parted as a figure entered, an elderly vampire Elena had never seen before, leaning on an ornate cane. Despite his apparent age, power radiated from him like heat from a furnace. "Counselor Matthias," Elise said, her voice suddenly deferential. "We didn't expect you to attend personally." The old vampire's eyes, milky with age but somehow still piercing, fixed on Elena. "I could hardly miss this. A human who bonds with vampire children and then defends them before the council? Unprecedented." He moved closer, studying Elena with unsettling intensity. "You feel it, don't you? The bond. Not just the surface connection, but the deeper current." Elena nodded slowly. "I feel their emotions, their fears, their hope. And they feel yours," Matthias said. It wasn't a question. "Fascinating." "This changes nothing," Elise insisted. The laws were written to protect our kind from exposure and exploitation. Matthias cut in. Not to prevent evolution. He turned to the council. I move that we observe rather than intervene. This arrangement may provide valuable insights. Elise's face was a mask of fury. Observe? They've created an abomination, a human with access to our vulnerabilities, bonded to creatures we barely understand. No, Elena said firmly. They've created a family. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Matthias's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. A family, he repeated, tasting the word. Yes, I believe that is precisely what they've done. Elise wasn't finished. With a gesture too quick for Elena to follow, she signaled to her enforcers. Enough debate. Secure the abominations and eliminate the human. Everything happened at once. The enforcers surged forward. Adrian moved to intercept them, his movements a blur. The twins screamed, their fear flooding through the bond like ice water. Elena didn't think. She acted. As an enforcer lunged for Jasper, she threw herself between them. Pain exploded across her shoulder as claws raked her flesh. She stumbled but didn't fall, keeping her body as a shield for the children. Stop! She shouted. They're just children! The enforcer hesitated, confusion crossing his features. That moment of hesitation was all Adrian needed. He appeared behind the enforcer, his movement so fast it seemed like teleportation. With terrifying efficiency, he snapped the vampire's neck, dropping him to the floor. Chaos erupted. Council members scattered as Adrian's allies, the 6 witnesses Jordan had mentioned, joined the fray. Mrs. Grady appeared from nowhere, wielding what looked like a modified flamethrower that sent vampires diving for cover. Through it all, Elena kept the twins behind her, backing them toward the staircase. Blood ran warm down her arm from the enforcers' claws, but adrenaline dulled the pain. A flash of white blonde hair, Elise was coming for them, her beautiful face transformed into something monstrous. If the council won't act, I will, she snarled. She moved with blinding speed, but something was wrong. As she neared, she staggered, her face contorting in confusion. She looked down at her chest, where an ornate silver handle protruded. Behind her stood Matthias, his ancient face grim. The council has not voted, Elise. Your action is unauthorized. Elise crumpled to the floor, the silver blade in her heart paralyzing her. Matthias looked up at the remaining council members, who had frozen in shock. Does anyone else wish to act without authorization? Silence fell. Even the enforcers had stilled, awaiting direction. I thought not, Matthias said. He turned to Adrian. An impressive defense, Thorne. Your family has proven its right to exist. Adrian stood amid the carnage, his clothing torn, dark blood, not his own, splattered across his face. And the council's verdict? Matthias looked around at his colleagues, then at Elena and the twins huddled on the stairs. The council will withdraw. The Thorne family will remain under observation, but otherwise unmolested. The human, he paused, studying Elena with those unsettling eyes, has demonstrated her commitment. The bond will be recognized as legitimate. Relief flooded through Elena so intensely she nearly collapsed. The twins pressed against her, their small bodies trembling with emotion that echoed her own through their bond. Elise, still paralyzed on the floor, made a strangled sound of rage. Matthias glanced down at her. As for Counselor Elise, she will face discipline for her unauthorized action. He nodded to 2 enforcers, who lifted her rigid form. The council is adjourned. As quickly as they had arrived, the vampires departed, taking their wounded with them. Only Jordan and his small group of allies remained, helping to restore order to the shattered entrance hall. Adrian approached slowly, his eyes fixed on Elena's bleeding shoulder. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," she said, though now that the adrenaline was fading, the pain was intensifying. He shook his head, gently examining the wound. "Foolish, brave human," he murmured. "You could have been killed." "So could you," she pointed out. His eyes met hers, something unspoken passing between them. "Yes," he admitted, "but I've lived centuries. You've barely begun." "Elena saved us," Jasper said, his small voice breaking the tension. "She didn't run away." Adrian's expression softened as he looked at his sons. "No, she didn't." He returned his gaze to Elena. "Thank you." Those two simple words contained multitudes. Dawn broke fully as Mrs. Grady tended to Elena's wound in the kitchen. The deep scratches would scar, but they were clean. No risk of turning from a mere enforcer's claws. "You did well," the housekeeper said, gruffly. "Better than the last ones." Elena winced as antiseptic stung the raw flesh. "The last nannies?" Mrs. Grady's hands paused. There were others who discovered the truth. None chose to stay. She resumed bandaging. "None fought for them like you did." When the wound was dressed, Elena found the twins waiting for her in the library. They had changed out of their formal clothes into pajamas, looking once again like the children they were. "Does it hurt bad?" Jasper asked, eyeing her bandaged shoulder. "Only a little," she assured him. Silas studied her face, always the more perceptive of the two. "You're staying, right? Even after everything?" Elena sat between them on the sofa, drawing them close. "Of course I'm staying. We're family now, remember?" Their relief flowed through the bond, warm and bright. They curled against her, exhaustion finally claiming them after the night's terrors. That was how Adrian found them an hour later. Elena with a twin asleep on either side of her, her own eyes heavy but watchful. He stood in the doorway, observing them silently. The morning light filtering through the curtains cast soft patterns across the scene. "They're finally asleep," Elena whispered. Adrian nodded, entering the room with that fluid grace that still took her breath away. "As you should be." "I wanted to make sure they were really okay," she explained. "The bond. I can feel their nightmares." "Yes," he said softly. "That's the nature of it. Their pain becomes yours. Their joy, too." He sat in the armchair opposite, studying her with an intensity that might once have frightened her. Now she met his gaze steadily. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "we rebuild. The council will be watching, but Matthias's protection buys us time and legitimacy." "And Elise?" A shadow crossed his face. "She won't trouble us again. The council's discipline for insubordination is thorough." Elena nodded, not wanting details. "And us? This family we've created?" Something shifted in Adrian's expression, vulnerability breaking through the immortal mask. "That depends on you, Elena. The bond with my sons is permanent now, recognized by our laws. But your place here—" He hesitated. "I would not hold you against your will." "And if my will is to stay?" The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken possibilities. "Then you would be welcome," he said carefully. "For as long as you wish." Elena studied him, this ancient, dangerous creature who had become something else in her eyes. Not just a monster, not just a protector. Something more complex, more human despite his immortality. "I think," she said slowly, "that might be a very long time." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Time means something different to my kind." "I'm beginning to understand that," she replied, Sunlight strengthened through the windows, touching Adrian's face. He didn't flinch or withdraw as she might once have expected. Instead, he seemed to welcome it, the warm glow softening the sharp angles of his features. "Rest now," he said, rising. "I'll watch over them." As he moved to leave, Elena caught his hand. The contact sent a jolt through her. Not fear, not anymore. "Thank you," she said, "for letting me be part of this family." Adrian looked down at their joined hands, then back to her face. "No, Elena Vance," he said softly. "Thank you for showing us what family truly means." He gently withdrew his hand and moved to the window, gazing out at the sunlit grounds of the estate. The twins slumbered peacefully against Elena, their small faces relaxed in sleep. Through their bond, she felt only contentment now, the nightmares banished. Outside, birds sang in the garden that had seemed so ominous when she first arrived. Now it felt like home, strange and beautiful and hers to protect. Elena closed her eyes, allowing exhaustion to finally claim her. As sleep approached, she felt the twins' steady heartbeats against her sides, and beyond that, Adrian's watchful presence, a shadow touched by morning light, transformed but not diminished by it. The last thing she heard before drifting off was the soft sound of Adrian humming, an ancient lullaby in a language she didn't recognize but somehow understood. A song of family, of belonging, of finding light in darkness. A song that would echo through the halls of Thorne Manor for many years to come.